Welcome to Dominican University of California. Have you been here before? Very good. I recognized you. It really is wonderful to have you back in this really great auditorium. Excuse me? We are environmentally sensitive. My name is Denise Lucy, and I am the director of the Institute for Leadership Studies, which is our co-host, our host of this program today. And I am professor of business and international studies here at Dominican, and it is my honor to welcome you along with our co-hosts, which is Book Passage, our major partner who has helped us all semester bring the greatest speakers to this auditorium. Another of our co-sponsors is the Environmental Education Council of Marin, and they also deserve a great round of applause for the work they do here. And my wonderful colleagues on the A Greener Dominican Task Force, students and faculty, staff who have come together at Dominican to say, we want to be and will become a sustainable campus here in Marin. We also have so many environmental groups, some of whom I don't even know, who've helped us promote tonight's event. So I want to thank you, even though I can't do it individually, but thank you so much for spreading the word tonight. The Institute for Leadership Studies is an organization that seeks to make people better leaders. We have a think tank where we do research with students and faculty. We have education and training programs and leadership development. We offer projects in the community with our students to give them chances to practice leadership, and organizations in the community are great partners in allowing that. We offer this public lecture series. Our goal is to promote a world where leaders facilitate positive organizational and social change. They are civically engaged and ethical, and are committed to social responsibility. Our motto at Dominican is that this place changes people. Our institute's motto is, our people change the world. And what a fitting opportunity to host Dr. David Suzuki tonight, someone who has made enormous impact in our world in such positive ways. Dominican's curriculum for the past 20 years in our general education, in our majors, has environmental sustainability embedded in it. So I'm so proud of those who preceded us, who understood the importance of environmental issues and in preparing future leaders for our world. I'm specifically happy to talk about the fact that one of our MBA graduates, I'm going to mention his name, John Staten. John, are you here? Yeah, John. John is the co-founder of the Green MBA, the only trademarked Green MBA in the country, by the way. It's 7 years old. He has been diligent with his colleagues to develop it. There are 50 students in the program, and it will be coming to Dominican University in the fall of 2007. We're in the final stages of those agreements, and that program will be a Dominican University degree, the Green MBA, Dominican. As I mentioned, our co-host is the Environmental Education Council of Marin. The executive director is Catriona McGregor Glazebrook. For over 20 years, Catriona has worked in the United States and internationally, building partnerships among people and NGOs to benefit the environment and to restore, honor, and protect nature. She is the founder of the International Bering Sea Forum and was CEO of the fourth largest Audubon Society, representing over 40,000 members in Latin American chapters. Her conservation strategies resulted in successfully bringing an endangered species back from the brink of extinction. She's a key advocate for the environmental education in public schools. She's also wrote the mandatory science education standards that impacted 3.8 million public school children. She's an author of a book and a treatise, and it's my honor to introduce to you Catriona McGregor Blazebrook.
Welcome. I just want to thank and honor Denise Lucy and Dominican University. Dominican University has always struck me as a university that really values the people that work here and the students that come here. And now they're turning their attention to valuing the environment and their Green MBA program. And Dominican is now truly a force to be contended with in the environmental movement. And I would just like to give Denise a hand and Dominican, because I just think it's fantastic what they're doing. We are honored today to have with us Dr. David Suzuki. He has accomplished so many things in his lifetime, what few people can accomplish. I said to him earlier, it looks as if the works that he has accomplished would have taken several lifetimes. Here is just a glimpse of a few of the many things that he has done that has helped to transform our world, educate people about nature and the environment. He is an internationally renowned scientist, environmentalist, and broadcaster who has spent over 40 years educating people about science and environmental issues around the world. He is noted for his ability to explain very complex issues in day-to-day language. His face is familiar to many around the world. He is the popular science TV show, The Nature of Things, which he hosted since 1979. David Suzuki's television career actually started in 1969 when he appeared on screens across Canada as the host of Suzuki on Science. David took to the radio in 1975 when he was hired to host Quirks and Quarks, a new weekly CBC science show that he hosted for 4 years. David has produced many other television series and specials, including A Planet for the Taking in 1985. This show won an award from the United Nations. He also produced The Sacred Balance in 2002. His PBS series on DNA, The Secret Life, was praised internationally, as was his 5-part series for the Discovery Channel, The Brain, the Universe Within. In addition to being a broadcaster, David has authored more than 40 books. The most recent being the second volume of his life story, David Suzuki, the autobiography. And as Denise said, there will be a book signing after this event. Over the years, David has received numerous Canadian and international awards for his work, of which most notable are UNESCO Prize for Science, a United Nations Environment Program Medal, the Companion of the Order of Canada, and 18 honorary university degrees. In addition, David has received many tributes from Canada's First Nations people, among which are 7 names, Native American names, including Man Who Knows Much, I'll say, Sacred Mountain. He is recognized as a world leader in sustainable ecology and has devoted himself wholeheartedly to educating the public about the importance of the natural world and the importance of protecting that natural world on our planet. In 1990, David and his wife, Dr. Tara Cullis, co-founded the David Suzuki Foundation that works to find ways for people to live sustainably and in balance with the natural world. David serves currently as the chair for that foundation. Please help me give a warm welcome to Drs. David Suzuki, Sacred Mountain, with a round of applause.
Thank you very much. Far too generous an introduction. I'm delighted to be here. I must admit that I'm shamelessly here to peddle a book. It is my autobiography, and I'm glad to say it's my last book. I've had a belly full of writing, and this is it for me. But it gives me an opportunity to spend an incredibly self-indulgent evening with you, spending all the time talking about me. But I want to say at the beginning, I'm just one human being, one person. I'm not going to make this huge difference to get us on a different path. My foundation is a tiny group. We're not going to be the critical organization to bring about the change. But I believe if millions and millions of us insignificant people work together with thousands of different organizations, we can become an irresistible force. And I'm thrilled to come here and see all of the activity and the various groups that I've met tonight in just a short time, to see that there is a real ferment going on here. And we are all working on this together, and we are all a part of a great movement and change that is going to come. It seems like an incredibly conceited thing to write an autobiography. Why do that? Well, I wrote one when I hit 50, and it was never intended as an autobiography. I knew I was too young to have anything worthwhile saying. I actually wrote a book of essays, and the editor kept saying, no, don't put that essay in. You put something of your own experience. And gradually it pushed everything except 3 of the essays at the end, and it became my autobiography. But in March this year, I reached my 70th birthday, and I figured, okay, Suzuki, you're coming to the end of your life. Like, most of your life is gone, the end is in sight, and the hill to it is getting pretty steep. I'm skidding down there, and maybe it's a time at least to reflect on whether I've learned a thing or two. I certainly don't feel old enough or wise enough to impart much wisdom, but I have had a couple of lessons that may be worth passing on to you. I also wanted to write a book that would acknowledge or point out the fact that people like me who are privileged to gain a certain public visibility, we don't spring into place because we're so great. Actually, we're the result of the work of dozens and dozens of people who believe in you, who work their hearts out without any request for recognition or credit for what they're doing. And I want to give them credit tonight. So many people who have made my life possible and my work possible. And the most important one, as you'll see, is my wife, but many, many other people. And I learned a very valuable lesson in the early 1970s when I was doing Science Magazine, one of my first big series on CBC. And I was still an active scientist, and I found this television making unbelievably frustrating. It was so slow. And anyway, we were filming in New Orleans in a lab, and I had to sit on a stool, and the lighting man comes and sets up the light. And it's unbelievably painstaking, putting the barn doors on and taking light readings. Then when he leaves, the sound man comes and fixes up your mic, and you got to do it, count from 10 to 1, and he fiddles with the thing. And then the camera assistant comes with a tripod and the camera, and then the cameraman, when everything's set, Rudy Kovanik, the cameraman, comes in, and he comes up to me with the light meter and takes a reading by my nose and goes back to the camera and adjusts the focus and comes back and takes and nothing's changed, He does this 6 or 7 times. Finally, I said, Rudy, for God's sake, shoot the bloody thing. And my boss, Jim Murray, grabbed me by the shoulder and pulled me into a room, closed the door. He said, now listen, Suzuki, everybody in that room's busting their ass to make you look good, and that's not easy. I kind of crept back into the room because I realized immediately he's absolutely right. Those guys are all doing their job to the best of their ability. When we shoot it and edit it and it runs on air, nobody says, wow, wasn't the lighting great? Or didn't the sound great? They all say, wasn't Suzuki great? I get all the credit for what these people are doing, and I just wanted to acknowledge that in the book. But the main reason I wrote the book was because environmentalists these days are portrayed as these people, with their brows furrowed and walking around with a little cloud over their head and, always so depressing. It's doom and gloom, and we're scolding people and saying, now you mustn't do this, you got to do this. Well, that's not what environmental activism has been for me at all. I mean, to me, my life has been traveling to amazing places, meeting some of the most remarkable people, and having wonderful adventures. And now and then we even get to celebrate a victory. And I thought, wow, if I could inspire people, especially young people, to realize that working for for a future with a healthy planet is a very exciting and wonderful thing to be doing, and that you have these great adventures, then maybe that book will have been worth writing. And so that's my justification anyway. So I'd like to start off by showing you a few pictures taken from the book. Now let's just hope this thing works, Rick. And it's looking good. I've taken a few pictures from the book and added a few pictures that are not in the book, and I'll just try to pull some vignettes here and there from the life, not to give you a complete sequence. What does that say? Okay. Restart later. Oops. So my life really begins here. In 1934, my mother and father, who were both born and raised in Vancouver, were married on March 21st. And 2 years later, my twin sister, Marcia, and I were born into the world. I love this picture because you realize, oh my God, Suzuki is really old. Look at the cars in the background there. And maybe it's an indication of what kind of a person I am. When I was born, I weighed over 9 pounds, and my sister weighed less than 3. But anyway, she flourished, and a few years later, we were joined by my beloved kid sister, Aiko, and she died on New Year's Eve this year, and for me, it's one of the great losses of my life. And this is on a picnic, but looking at it and thinking back, my mother was a very typical Japanese Canadian, very shy and quiet, and she was the heart of the family, of course. She was the first one up in the morning, the last to go to bed at night, but she was always in the background making sure everything was working. My dad was the outgoing guy. He loved to talk. Everybody loved my father. But as I think back on my life, my mother gave me such a tremendous gift. When a few years after this, I discovered a magical place, a swamp near our house, and every chance I got, I'd jump on my bike and go down to that swamp, and I'd wade in with my shoes and pants on, right into the swamp with a little dip net and a bottle, and I'd be dipping away. And whenever I came home, covered in mud and soaking wet, my mother never ever said, "Don't come in the house, you'll dirty the floor." She would welcome me in and strip off my clothes. And everything I showed her, she acted as if I should get a Nobel Prize for it. Like, "Oh, I've never seen salamander eggs before. Isn't that wonderful?" Or the little fish or turtles that I got. And she really encouraged that great love of nature. I remember one year I got this idea. I was going to gather dew worms at night and sell them to fishermen for half a cent a piece and make a fortune. So, at night you go out with a flashlight, and I gathered several hundred dew worms and put them in a box, and I put them in the fridge. And the next morning I woke up and went out in the kitchen, and there was my mother sitting on the floor. The worms had crawled all up through the refrigerator, and she was just picking them out of the fridge. She didn't give me a dirty look, scold me, nothing. That was my mother, and she was one of the great inspirations of my life. My father was the great hero, my buddy and my teacher and my mentor, and my father loved camping and hiking and fishing. And this is the very first memory I have of childhood in British Columbia. I was 4 years old, and we'd gone up to a lake called Loon Lake. And you see, on the first day, I caught my limit of trout, and I've been hooked on fishing ever since. This is September 1941. My sister and I think you can see from the expression on our faces, we're pretty happy. It's our first day going to kindergarten, and it was very, very exciting. On December 7th, 1941, 3 months later, Japan attacked Pearl Harbor, and our lives were turned upside down. There were about 22,000 Japanese living on the west coast of British Columbia. Most of them, I'd say 90% of them, were Canadians by being naturalized. About 10% of them were like my parents and me and my sisters. We were Canadian born. But we were Canadian citizens. But because we looked like the enemy, Canada removed all our rights, and we were incarcerated in a camp in the Rocky Mountains for the duration of the war. And as I reflect on that, democracy is a wonderful concept. Your president has been trying to spread it into the Middle East. And the thing about democracy is you never get enough of it. You always have to work hard to get more of it. And it's easy when times are good to guarantee equality before the law and all of the rights and freedoms, the freedom to move and talk, speak in public. The only time those rights and guarantees matter are when times are tough. And if you can't guarantee it when times are tough, what kind of a democracy is that? And I believe Canada and the United States failed that test miserably in 1941. But the important point is to remember that. I feel my job is to remind people of this, not to feel sorry for me, but because we've got to keep working to make our democracy better. And ever since 9/11, I worry because I see that same kind of fear happening now with people who may look or dress differently and have different languages or customs, and suddenly we seem ready to deprive all those rights of citizenship. If they're citizens, they're citizens. And we've got to guarantee them every right and privilege. But we were shipped up into the mountains of British Columbia for 3 years, and here I am in my first class at school, and guess what? Everybody looks like me. The problem was, this is me here, and this is Herb Tanaka. Herb and I were the only two students in that entire class whose mother and father had been born and raised in Canada. All the other kids in the class had parents that came from Japan, so all the other kids were fluently bilingual. Herb and I couldn't speak any Japanese. So when we're out playing, the kids are flipping from Japanese to English to Japanese. Half the time we didn't know what they were talking about. So naturally they picked on us. So the guys used to beat us up all the time. I hated Japanese. The problem was when I looked in the mirror, that was the guy I hated, right? Not only that, these slitty eyes, that's what my government was saying was the enemy. And one of the terrible legacies and burdens of the years that we spent in the camp is that to this day I hate the way that I look. I mean, you live with it and you grow up with it. But I was watching an old film of mine with my wife the other night, and she said, "David, you realize every time you come on the screen, you turn away and you don't look." And I didn't even know that. I wasn't even aware of it. But that is one of the legacies of those years, the self-hate and self-loathing that came out of that. And when I think of African Americans, when I think of Native Americans, and the hundreds of years of being told they were savages or primitive or whatever, and generation after generation under that kind of discrimination, you got to really try to imagine the burden that they carry with them. When the war came to an end, we were dispersed by being sent either to Japan, which was a foreign country to us, or east of the Rocky Mountains. British Columbia didn't want any more Japanese left in the province, so we ended up in Ontario. My dad worked on a farm. This is before the days of heavy use of pesticides, so there were insects everywhere, and my mother sewed me a used cheesecloth and made me a butterfly net, and I became an avid collector of insects. And again, just a wonderful way to enter into the natural world. I think insects are the dominant animals on the planet. Long after we're gone, don't worry, there'll be lots of insects around. And they're absolutely fascinating creatures. And so I became an avid insect collector. This also is a snapping turtle. I don't think you have any in California. They have razor-sharp mouths and they can take your finger off very quickly. But we used to get snapping turtles as big as a wash tub. And they could take your whole hand off with one bite. We got these animals because we were impoverished by the war. We ate these for our food. In 1949, just as I was going to high school, my dad felt that education was really critical for us to escape our poverty. So he didn't want us to stay in a rural community, and we moved to London, Ontario, which at that time was a city of 70,000 people. But when we got to London, I was already in full-blown post-pubertal obsession with girls. And of course, because of the war, there was no way I would ever think of asking a white girl out, but I was just daydreaming about girls all the time. My dad called me in one day. He said, "David, I know that you want to date girls, but I want you to understand, the only acceptable girl for you to go out with is a Japanese girl." I said, "Dad, there are only 10 Japanese girls in London, and 3 of them are my sisters." "Okay," he said, "you're right. You don't have much choice. So if you find a Chinese girl, that's okay with me." "Dad, there are only 3 Chinese families in all of London. I don't know any of them." Okay. If you find a native girl, that's okay with me." I said, "Dad, I don't even know where the reservation is. I've never met a native girl." Okay. If you find a black girl, that's okay with me. Well, there was a beautiful black girl in my class, but she wasn't interested in me, and I didn't know any other black. Okay, if you find a Jewish girl, that's okay with me. So you can see my dad had this hierarchy of what he would accept. But he said, absolutely, rock bottom, unacceptable to me. If you start going out with an English girl, I'll kick you out of the family. Well, he didn't have to worry. I'd never have the nerve to ask an English girl out. But many years later, when my second wife was English, that led to a few interesting situations. But if you move to a city and you want to go out, you're horny all the time and can't do anything about it, what do? You go fishing. Thank God for fishing. So this is a carp that I caught. This is London, Ontario. So we have a Thames River. And in the Thames River, it was a rich river. I caught this carp. I know that white people think that carp are trash fish, but Asians love and respect carp. And we ate all the carp that I caught in the Thames River, as well as anything else. Today, when I tell people in London that we ate the fish out of the Thames River, they all go, "Oh my God, you must glow at night." The Thames is so polluted today, nobody would ever eat a fish coming out of that river. And yet when I was there in 1949, it was a rich, vibrant ecosystem filled with fish, and we ate everything that we caught. The great burden that I had, my father always believed that one of the impediments for Japanese Canadians was that we were very shy and self-effacing, and we were very awkward when we were asked to get up and speak. He said, if you want to succeed in Canada, you've got to be able to get up on your feet and speak. So he made me enter public speaking contests. And he would train me then. I would have to write my speech out, and every night after dinner I'd have to go in the basement and I'd have to give my speech. If I flubbed a line or missed a word, I'd have to go back to the beginning and start over. He might say, wait, at that point that's important, so move your hands like this and emphasize the point. Then I'd have to start over. Or he'd say, now that's an important phrase. Slow down before you get to there, and then give it with a lot of emphasis. And then I'd have to go and start over. By the end of the evening, I'd be weeping with rage and frustration. But he trained me to be a public speaker, and I'm grateful for that. And I won a few prizes for it. In high school, I suffered from the terrible problem that I got good grades. They used to call people like me brains. And in high school, if you were a brain, that was like having syphilis. It was just terrible. And, in high school, high school students are divided into two, right? There are the innies and there are the outies. And the innies play basketball, football, hockey. They're the cheerleaders. They're the beautiful people that set the social scene. And then the outies are everybody else, They're the brains. They're the people that are in glee club or drama club or debate club. They're all the outies. And in my last year of high school, some kid said, why don't you run for president of the student body? So I said, gee, there's no way I could do that. This is my family car at the time, a 1929 Model A. Dad let me use the car to campaign for president. And I decided I'm going to appeal to the outies. I said, I'm not one of the beautiful people. I'm not a jock. I'm not a star on the football team. But I'm an outie, and if you're an outie, vote for me. And I discovered a very important thing, people's power. There are way more outies than innies. I got more votes than all the other candidates combined. So, good lesson from high school. Because I had a good academic record, I was astonished to receive the offer of a scholarship to go to Amherst College in Massachusetts. And, it was a very elite school, and there's no way I could afford to go. But Amherst offered me a scholarship that was worth more than my father earned in a year. In 1954, that was $1,500. But I was thrilled because there's no way I could have afforded to go there. And I was honored and forever indebted to Amherst because they believed foreign students like me enriched the education of the other American students there. They wanted foreign students, not to gouge them for money, but because they offered a different perspective and enhanced the education of the other students. The other thing, they gave me a great gift. Amherst made me the scholar that I am for whatever I am, but they also believed that the well-rounded Amherst graduate had to take part in sports. My dad always thought sports were frivolous. And he would say, you work as hard as you can at school. When you're finished, you come home, do the chores, and then you do your homework. But no sports. And because of Amherst, they made you go out for a school team. And I discovered the joys of athletics and played on the rugby and lacrosse team and swimming team. And it was something that I continue to do to this day. And so I was grateful for that. Graduated from Amherst in biology in 1958. Now, I had been accepted to medical school at the University of Western Ontario in London, Ontario, my hometown. But in my senior year, I fell absolutely madly in love with genetics. So I turned down the position that was offered to me at Western so that I could go to graduate school for a PhD. And my mother wept for months. She couldn't believe her son would turn down a chance to be a medical doctor so he could study the genetics of fruit flies. But that was the choice I made. I also discovered that there was a pretty cute girl, a Japanese girl in London, and I married her. Joanne and I were married in August of 1958, and she got a visa to come down and work so she could put me through graduate school. And then when I got my PhD, I would get a job in a university and we'd have our family and blah, blah, blah. So off we went to the University of Chicago. And this is my professor, Bill Baker. And it's really funny to see someone smoking today in the lab like that. This is Anita Hessler, one of the grad students. And all of these vials and bottles are filled with hundreds and hundreds of fruit flies and that have to be separated and counted. I thought I knew everything about sex and families and all that, but guess what? 5 months after we were married, Joanne was pregnant, and this amazing shock and the most delightful part of my life was to discover parenthood. And being a father continues to be the greatest experience of my life. So this is my eldest daughter, Tamiko, and now Joanne had to stay home half a day. She couldn't work full time, so we were under a lot of pressure, and I finished my degree then in less than 3 years, and was thrilled to get an offer of a position at the Oakridge National Laboratory in Oakridge, Tennessee. Now, Oakridge was under the Manhattan Project during World War II. Oakridge was where they purified the uranium that was used in the bombs that were dropped over Hiroshima and Nagasaki. After the war, the labs were converted into research labs, and the biology division at Oakridge had one of the top genetics groups in the world. And it was a great opportunity to go and to carry on my research career. This man is Dan Lindsley, who was the head of the lab and just a great fruit fly geneticist who taught me a tremendous amount. And while I was there, this man, Professor Tezima from Japan, came. He was one of the leading experts on the genetics of silkworms. And he tried to persuade me to go to Japan and apply the ideas from fruit flies to do the genetics of silkworms. And I was very, very tempted, but in the end I realized that I'd have to take my family there for 3 or 4 years, and it got too complicated. And I ended up coming back to Canada in 1962. So here I am now, beginning my career as a geneticist at the University of Alberta in Edmonton. And I was going to conquer the world. I thought, wow, this is terrific, and I was getting ready to make my reputation in science. But 2 things happened to me that first year at the University of Alberta. The university, even in 1962, the university had a television program on a local community channel called Your University Speaks. It was an unbelievably boring program. But someone heard that I was a good lecturer, so they asked me to do a show. And I did one, and they loved it, and they asked me to do another, and then another. And I ended up doing 8 television programs that first year. And I realized then this is a very powerful medium for communication. And I recognized that I had a certain knack for taking complex scientific ideas and making them understandable to the general public. So in 1962, my first television experience, it planted a seed in my head that television was a powerful medium of communication, and it led eventually to an entire career in television. But the most important thing that happened to me that year was that I as I was beginning my career, a woman published a book that changed my life. That woman was Rachel Carson. In 1962, Rachel Carson published Silent Spring about the effects of pesticides. And it's hard to imagine what the world was like in 1962. When that book came out, there wasn't a single department or minister of the environment in any government on the planet. The environment simply didn't exist as an issue until Rachel Carson put it on the map. And when I read the book, it was as if she wrote the book to me. The message said, you scientists are clever. Yeah, you can make DDT and show it kills insects. But you forget the lab is not the real world. You can show in the lab that you spray DDT and it kills insects and the plants seem to be fine. But in the real world, everything is connected to everything else. What you're doing in the lab is studying an artifact, an artificial situation, because you don't have the context in the real world to see the other interactions with other plants and other animals, to see the interaction with the water and the air, and to see the cycles and the rhythms and the patterns that all impinge on that part of nature. And for the first time, I had always thought that what I was doing was replicating, having a mini representation of nature. And what I did in the lab, you just say, oh, well, we extrapolate to the real world. But what she showed me was, it's an artifact, and you can't tell what's going to happen out in the real world. And I'm ashamed to say most of my colleagues in genetics and biotechnology still haven't got it. They think they can do all these, and they can do all these fancy manipulations in the lab and create new creatures. But then they think, oh yeah, well, I studied in a growth chamber here, everything seems fine, so sure, grow it out in the open field. They don't get the message that Rachel Carson told us. And for me, it transformed my life. I don't know what the hell is going on here. Unfortunately, that first winter in Edmonton, you ought to look at a map sometime to see where Edmonton is. It's very far north. It was 40 degrees below zero for a month. And I realized human beings shouldn't live this way. A job came up at the University of British Columbia. I applied for it, I got it, and I took it. And I stayed at UBC from 1963 until I retired in 2001. But I very quickly acquired a very large lab. I had the largest genetics lab in Canada at one time. And my students became like my family. And I would work at the lab 7 days a week, well into the night till 1 or 2 in the morning. And looking back, you think, wow, you were so ambitious. But my marriage broke up, and that was one of the casualties of that ambition. But after my marriage broke up in the mid-60s, I was offered a job in the genetics department at the University of California in Berkeley. And it was very, very flattering. You know, I loved Berkeley, and it was a very eminent department. I didn't want to leave my children, but I said, look, let me come down and teach for a quarter, and we'll see whether you like me and I like you, and then we'll decide. Well, I came down in the very quarter that People's Park broke out. And some of you may be old enough to remember they killed a boy, and Ronald Reagan brought in the Alameda County sheriffs and wounded a number of people. They gassed the campus several times while I was teaching. And I just decided, I can't stand the country that does this to its own children. And so I taught the course, and when I finished, I said, I'm going to go home to British Columbia. And I had a wonderful experience. I did come back and teach at Berkeley for a couple more quarters, but I never took a permanent position. But when I came back from Berkeley, I had undergone a bit of a transformation. And this is, it was the 60s, right? This is when I started my first television program, Suzuki on Science, and scientists hated it. They absolutely hated it because I was a legitimate scientist, but I looked like a hippie. Fortunately, young kids loved the show, and I developed a kind of cult following for a few years while it was showing. When I got to British Columbia, of course, I spent a lot of time enjoying the out of doors and taking my lab along with me. This is the Stein Valley up near the tree line, up in the alpine area, and below in the valley was a wonderful forest, and years later I got involved in a battle over the logging that was going to take place in the Stein. But British Columbia to me is one of the most beautiful places on the planet. But if you do any kind of backpacking, you very quickly encounter what is going on in your province. This is considered proper forestry practice. Now you just have to look at that mountain and look at what's been done to the forest, and you know in your gut. You don't have to be a scientist to know this is not the way you treat a forest. This clear cut is not just 40 or 50 acres. This is kilometers in length up and down that mountain. And you know after clear cuts like that, you're never going to grow a forest like the one that was cut down. And the victims of that kind of practice, of course, are animals like this. I took this picture in the estuary of a wonderful valley that was covered with an old-growth forest. And grizzly males especially require hundreds of kilometers of virgin forest in order to roam over a year. And human beings have become unbelievably greedy, and we're not willing to share that space with animals like this. And so, naturally, they're disappearing. And so, because of what I encountered out there in the forests and the mountains, I was swept up in the environmental struggle against clear-cut logging and so on in British Columbia. I had been single for 6 years, and one of the great gifts that Joanne gave me when we separated was that we both agreed that our children were the result of our love for each other. And we promised each other we would never use the children to hurt or punish the other partner. And that was a great gift. And she gave me complete access. I'd drop in around dinner time and cadge a meal because I'm a Japanese male. I can't cook. And when I went camping with the children, she'd often come with us and even let me climb into her sleeping bag now and then. So for 6 years, we maintained a family, and that was a great gift that Joanne gave to me. But I had been single for that time, and in 1971 I was invited to give a lecture at Carleton University in Ottawa, and I went, and the room was packed, 400 kids packed in the room, sitting in the aisles and on the stairs at the back. And as I began to speak, I noticed this woman sitting in the audience, and to me she was just sensationally beautiful. So naturally I tried to give the best speech I could give. And at the end of the talk, as people were filing out, a few people come down to the front to talk some more, and she was one of them. So now you can imagine my brain is racing 100 miles an hour. How do you pick up a white girl? Like, I had and I'd go out drinking beer with my students, and I'd watch them in the pub. They'd just go up and they just say a couple of words, and next thing you know, they're talking and laughing and going off, and I could never figure out how you do that. But so I, chatted a while, and finally I said, "Look, I'm sorry I have to go. I hope you're all coming to the party tonight," and left. Didn't tell them where, what time, or anything. But fortunately, she got interested and showed up, and the rest, as they say, is history. We were married exactly a year to the day after we met, December 10th, 1972. So now I was in heaven. She was a grad student at Carleton working on a master's in comparative literature, but she lived in Vancouver. I met someone who was beautiful. She was 10 times smarter than me, and unlike me, she was really nice. So I had a wonderful year, and at the end of our first year, she came and said, "David, I love being your wife, but I really feel I have to complete my education. Otherwise, I'll disappear as just your spouse. And I want to go on for a PhD." And it was a very painful thing for both of us. But I said, "Don't take the easy way out and go to UBC, just so that you can stay in Vancouver. Find out the best place in the area you're interested in and go there, and I'll support you." And she went to the University of Wisconsin in Madison in French, German, and English literature. And it was very tough. I mean, you're young, you're in love, and commuting is not easy. But, now that I'm 70, looking back, 2 years is nothing, right? And it was for me, I think it was really an affirmation that we had a relationship that would last, and it made us all the stronger to have struggled through those 2 years. And before you knew it, she'd finished her courses, done very well, had a professor, had a thesis topic, and came back to Vancouver to write the thesis and do some other things as well. And one of the first projects was with me, and now, of course, she was a very strong feminist. When you're married to a feminist, you got to change, right? Japanese male, but anyway, it's, you know, not only do you carry your kid around, but notice the laundry hamper, you know, this is what you have to do. And after several years then, Tara completed her degree and wrote a magnificent thesis. And this is a celebration we're having. If the picture went down further, you'd see our second child was also on the way. Out of interest, this is shot through our dining room of our house. We live on the ocean. This is Vancouver in the background. And the dark area here is Stanley Park, 1,000 acres of forest. It's a magnificent park. And behind Stanley Park is Lionsgate Bridge that connects us to West Vancouver, North Vancouver. And in 15 minutes you can be up skiing up on the mountains. We live in a wonderful part of the world. Come and visit sometime, but don't stay. Go back home, please. As soon as Tara got her thesis, she was offered a job teaching writing at Harvard, which she accepted. And for 6 years we commuted. We'd take the children to Toronto, where I did my television work, take care of the kids, and she would commute down to Boston during the weekdays. And I really felt it's very, very hard to be a feminist back in those days, because trying to balance family and a career was very difficult. But Tara did it with great pizzazz. In the late 70s, I became aware of a battle over logging that had been going on in the archipelago just south of the panhandle of Alaska. These islands are called the Queen Charlotte Islands, off the northwest corner of British Columbia. And for years, environmentalists and the Haida people had been trying to stop the logging that was going on. So I decided to do a show for the nature of things, and flew up and did my program, and it changed my life from that experience.
The forests of Canada are more than just a potential source of revenue. They're a part of the spiritual mystique of the country. I'm on Windy Bay in the Queen Charlotte Islands off the coast of British Columbia. And this virgin forest began its existence over 8,000 years ago. Many of these trees were already mature adults long before Christopher Columbus discovered America. It was here that the Haida Indians hunted and fished. They used these trees to build their totems, their dugouts, and their longhouses. It was these trees that inspired Emily Carr to paint some of her most haunting pictures. Yet having existed for thousands of years, this forest could disappear in a matter of months through logging. Tonight we take a look at a special issue that affects all Canadians and that asks us to redefine the very notion of progress.
Our people have determined that Windy Bay and some other places on the Charlottes must be left in their natural condition so that we could keep our identity and pass it on to the following generations. And a forest like that, the ocean and those things are what keep us as Haida people today.
So if they're logged off?
If they're logged off, we'll probably end up the same as everyone else, I guess.
In a matter of months, all of this could be gone. At the top of the hills, a logging company is poised to sweep into the valley. This moonscape was once like Windy Bay, and like Windy Bay, it too was part of Tree Farm License number 24, the permit that will allow Western Forest Products Limited to conduct the same kind of clear-cut logging in the watershed.
So this is Windy Bay, 6,000 hectares of land, of old-growth forest, and a logging company had been given a permit by the province to log right up from the tops of these mountains right down to the edge of this river, which was a salmon-bearing river. Behind these trees here, the Haida had a longhouse. To the Haida, this is a sacred valley, and they decided to draw the line. They were going to blockade the road and prevent the logging trucks from coming in. So I was swept up with them, and I decided to commit myself to their struggle, and was amazed to discover this vibrant culture that I didn't know anything about right in the middle of our province. So here's Gu Jiao, the fellow that was in the video that I just showed, and here is one of the dances that they performed at their feasts. And the Haida were going to. They knew that they would be arrested for blockading the road, and I said that I would join them and get arrested. And as soon as the CBC heard that I was up there getting ready to get arrested, they called and said, "If you get arrested, we'll pull you off the air and we'll probably cancel The Nature of Things." Now, The Nature of Things had been running as a television program since 1960. And I joined it in 1979 when it became a 1-hour program. And it was a very important science program. There was no way I could jeopardize the nature of things by going out and getting arrested. But I wanted to get arrested. And then my father stepped in and he said, "Well, I've got the same name as you. I'll get arrested in your place." So this is my father. He's at the beach on Windy Bay, and you can see he's perfectly relaxed and happy. And the Haida, of course, adored my father. But I was freaked out. He was 73 at the time. I did not want my dad to get arrested and thrown in jail. Fortunately, all of the publicity, the program that I did got a huge following, and the government was bombarded with Canadian letters and phones saying don't allow the logging to go in. 20 Haida were arrested in the end. But the government caved in. And they not only protected Windy Bay, they protected all of the islands south of Windy Bay, and now 144,000 acres are a part of Guayhanas National Park preserved forever. So, a great victory. Because my family, Tara, my dad, everyone was swept up with the Haida fighting for their land, we began to get requests from First Nations people all across the country asking us to help, and we tried to do whatever we could. I got involved with the Innu people in Labrador fighting against the NATO jets that are doing low-level test flights over the caribou herds, and that battle continues to this day. I helped the Cree in Quebec who were fighting a big dam that was going to be built on Great Whale River, and I did a video and we stopped it. I fought with the Lubicon fighting against Daishowa, a Japanese company that's logging their territory. That battle continues to this day. I joined the Gwich'in in Yukon fighting against, it was primarily the United States plan to drill for oil in the Arctic National Wildlife Refuge. And believe me, that thing over and over again has been fought by American environmentalists and the Gwich'in. We came so close this time to losing that battle with George Bush in office. I really despaired about whether that line could be held, and I can't tell you how happy I was Tuesday night. But one of the first groups to ask me to help were the Lilwat people who were fighting for that Stein Valley where I showed you that one shot in the upper reaches of the Stein Valley. A logging company had been given permission to log the entire lower bottom of the valley, and the Lilwat people said, "This is a sacred valley. We're not going to allow it. Please help." And I said, "Well, what do you need?" And they said, "We want to have a celebration every year in the forest in the Stein Valley, and if we can get enough people coming to celebrate the Stein, then maybe the government won't dare allow the logging to go on." So the first thing I did is I called this guy. This is, you might recognize him, John Denver. And when I called John, he immediately agreed to come up. And this was his girlfriend, Cassandra, an Australian woman who he married and divorced. But John came up and thousands of people came. And he gave a wonderful performance in the Stein Valley. And then we got Gordon Lightfoot to come up and Buffy St. Marie and a whole series of people. Norman Jewison came up and gave money on behalf of him and Cher. And after 5 or 6 years, they got 35,000 people came to one of these festivals. And I knew then there's no way they'll ever allow logging. And sure enough, a few years later, the province declared it a provincial park. So another great victory that we succeeded in protecting the Stein Valley. I just showed this because it's such a spectacular shot. The coastal people in British Columbia are ocean people. And traditionally in the past, each year the various nations would send canoes to a gathering somewhere along the coast, and the young men would meet girls and they would find brides and all that stuff. But for 100 years, there hadn't been a canoe gathering on the coast of British Columbia. So this year, the Hiltsuk people in Bella Bella issued a call for all of the nations up the coast, all the way down to Oregon. They said, build a canoe and paddle it up here. And about 20 canoes arrived, and it was just a spectacular scene. They were met, each canoe as they came in were greeted by these dancers in their blankets, and the blankets have their crests. This is a raven, this is an eagle, and the buttons are made of mother of pearl and abalone shell, and they would be welcomed ashore. And it was just a spectacular demonstration that their culture is still alive and well. And when you go to feasts or celebrations on the coast, one of the things they make you do as a guest is they make you get up and dance. So this is me here, and they've got me all dressed up in this regalia, and they start drumming, and you have to jump up and down. And I always feel very self-conscious, but I've found that it's not how well you dance, it's the fact that you get up and dance. They feel that you honor them, and they really appreciate however badly you do it. So I participate. Tara and I we've been adopted by 3 different tribes in British Columbia, and we've had wonderful experiences across Canada. But we've also met Aboriginal people in other parts of the world. This is an Aboriginal woman we met in Australia at Ayers Rock. It's now called Uluru. And this woman came up. We were just tourists there, and she came up and said, "Do you want me to show you around?" And we were delighted. And as we walked around the rock, I thought, my God, what a God-forsaken desert this is. But she just started picking things up, and here she is showing us what she picked up, and all of the plants and the insects that they use for medicine or they eat. And you realize, again, the enormous body of knowledge that indigenous people have. This is knowledge accumulated over thousands of years. And when these cultures die out, we lose this knowledge. Science will never duplicate the knowledge that people like this have. And so, again, even in the Australian desert, for this culture, the desert is like a pharmacy and a supermarket for them. Years later, I was filming for The Sacred Balance, and the northern part of Australia is called Arnhem Land, and that's controlled by the Aboriginal people. You can't just go into it on your own. You have to apply for permission. And we applied to go to Numbulwar, one of their villages, and they gave us permission to come and film for the Sacred Balance. And we got to witness a dance that no non-Aboriginal person had ever seen before, and they allowed us to see it and film it. And it's in the Sacred Balance. So again, a wonderful demonstration of the culture that is still there. Australia was once the colonizer of Papua New Guinea, the island north, or at least half of Papua New Guinea, north of Australia. And their television and radio programs are broadcast into PNG. And I was amazed to get an invitation in the early 1990s to visit Papua New Guinea. And of course I accepted it instantly. And when I landed, I was greeted on the tarmac by these 2 dancers. Look at the incredible outfit this guy has. And she was gorgeous, and they both greeted me and then danced and drummed. And they drummed me into the airport and right past customs, right out into the street. Nobody said a word. Into a car, and off I went. And I thought, wow, I'd like to be greeted that way everywhere. And I was there for 2 weeks, and they flew me into these remote villages all throughout the islands. And it was just an amazing experience. This is a landing and an airstrip at the head of what's called the Kokoda Track. The Kokoda Track in Australia is very famous. It's a trail that runs across the spine of the island from the north side to the south side. And the Japanese had sent thousands of troops in to cross on the Kokoda Track to take Port Moresby. And if they could land in Port Moresby and take it, they would have an easy way of bombing the hell out of Australia. So the Australians fought the Japanese, and thousands of people were killed on the Kokoda Track. And when we landed, I was greeted by this amazing group of people, and I knew that a couple generations ago they were cannibals, right? So it was pretty intimidating to get out of the plane and as soon as I got out, two guys grabbed me by the legs, scared the hell out of me, and they flipped me up on their shoulders, and they ran a mile into the village. You know, it was hot as hell out. They were sweating buckets and bouncing me up and down into the village. But they treated me like a king. It was a wonderful experience to visit the Aboriginal people. And I just show you this because, the diversity of human culture is wonderful. And the knowledge that these people have is, to me, priceless. And we've got to recognize their existence and do all we can to help, I believe, protect them. When I was a boy, I dreamt of going to what I used to call the 3 big A's. I wanted to go to Africa, I wanted to go to Australia, and I wanted to go to the Amazon. And in 1988, the Nature of Things decided to do a show on the Amazon.
I'm standing in one of the richest communities of organisms on the planet, the Amazon forest. It's a place we hardly know anything about, and we probably never will, because around the world, tropical forests are rapidly disappearing. In Brazil, the rainforest is being destroyed by poverty, injustice, and a race for industrial development. Tonight we bring you a report on what's happening in the Brazilian Amazon and why we're all deeply involved in this tragedy.
So I flew to Brazil in August of 1988 for 2 months of filming, and I met this man. I'm sorry it's out of focus. It's the only photo I have of my first meeting with him. He's a Kaiapo Indian. His name is Paiakan, and Paiakan had fought to control a gold mine that was going on in his territory, and I decided to do a film about the Kaiapo as part of our show on the Amazon. And when I flew into his village with him, he told me that he had discovered that Brazil had a project called Plano 2010, which was a plan to build a series of giant dams on all of the major rivers emptying into the Amazon, and they had received the promise of a $500 million loan from the World Bank. And one of the dams was to be built in a town called Altamira on the Xingu River, and it would flood all of the Kaiapo territory. And the government hadn't even told him this. And he said, I want to stop the dam and I need help. Can you help me? I said, what do you need? He said, I need money. So I did what I always do when I get involved with a group. As soon as I got out of his village and found a telephone, I called my wife. I said, Tara, this guy needs help. He's willing to come to Canada. He needs money. What do you think we can do? And what do you think we can do? And she went ahead, and while I was filming in Brazil, organized 2 huge events in Toronto and Ottawa. And when I came home, then Paiakan came up, and thousands of people came, and we raised $70,000. And I met the Minister of Finance months later, and he told me he got hundreds of letters from Canadians telling him not to vote for the loan to Brazil from the World Bank. So Canadians responded and gave generously. We gave the money to Paiakan. He bought a boat and a motor and went up and down the Xingu River telling all of the Indians what was happening and inviting them to a demonstration at Altamira. So Tara and I decided, let's go down to the demonstration. And in order to do that, Tara learned Portuguese. I told you she was smart. And so she became the interpreter, and we took 40 Canadians down to the demonstration at Altamira. And one of the people that came with us was this guy. He doesn't look like much in his outfit there, but his name is Gordon Lightfoot. And Gordon Lightfoot was a big supporter of ours and came down to show support for Paiakan. And when we got to Altamira, another celebrity showed up, and this is Sting. And Sting was supporting this man here, who's a Kaiapo chief named Hawani. You can recognize him by that big labret in his lower lip. And so Sting was supporting Hawani. I was supporting Paiakan, who was the brains behind this whole thing. And this was a press conference we had, and all of the Indians were here. You can tell they're from different tribes by the headdresses that they have. And this is Simon Dick, who's a Kwakwaka'wakw Indian from Vancouver Island. This is an Iroquois from the United States. And this guy here, if you've ever seen these ads on television for Lakota medicine, that's Red Crow. He was there. So we had this gathering of Indians from all over the place supporting Paiakan to fight against the dams. And here's where the demonstration took place, in a big building for 3 days. On the inside wall were hundreds of Brazilian soldiers armed with machine guns and rifles. And then the head table where the speakers sat is here. And then down on the dirt floor were hundreds of Indians from 30 different tribes. And you can tell they're from different tribes by the headdresses. You can't see that one there. And then around in a horseshoe around the Indians were hundreds of environmentalists and television crew and reporters from around the world. So this is where the demonstration took place. This is at an incredibly dramatic moment. This man here he's the official from the company that was going to build the dams. He had just told the men down below, I'm sorry we forgot to tell you, we're going to build the dams. But Brazil needs the energy and the money, but don't worry, we'll find you a forest somewhere else or we'll give you money. This is a classic example, right? We're going to destroy your home, but we'll give you money. And when he sat down, this woman here, who's a Kaiapo, jumped up and facing the men, she said, you call yourselves warriors. This man just told you they're going to build a dam and flood our territory, and not one of you got up and killed him. What kind of warriors are you? And she then pulled out her machete, and with the flat of the blade, she slapped him on both sides of the face, and right away the guns came up. I was terrified. I looked at Tara. I said, hit the ground. There's no way we can get out of here. Just hit the floor and cover your head. And I was just praying nothing would happen. And Paiakan jumped up and grabbed the microphone, and that's when the picture was taken. And by the sheer force of his personality, he got them to put the guns down. He said, look, this is theatrical. Kaiapo don't mean anything. Put your guns down. Everything's going to be okay. And as soon as the guns were finally down, I ran outside because I had to clean out my underwear. It was the most terrifying moment of my life. Now, in the end, after 3 days, the World Bank withdrew the loan it offered for $500 million, and to this day, not a single dam has been built. So, now, in Brazil, they kill activists with impunity. For our film, we interviewed a rubber tapper named Chico Mendes, and 2 weeks after we interviewed him, he was assassinated. So during this demonstration at Altamira, Paiakan began to get death threat after death threat, and we took them very, very seriously. On the last day, we sat down with him and said, look, what are we going to do to protect you? And he said, Brazilians get very excited and they're hot-headed, but they forget very quickly. So if I can get out of the country for a few weeks, they'll calm down and then it'll be okay. So we said, great, what do you want to do? He said, I want to come to Vancouver and stay with you and Tara. So a few days after we arrived in Vancouver, up came Paiakan and his family. This is Irakran, his wife, and their youngest daughter, Mayao. And Irakran was only 22 years old. But man, she was fierce. She never smiled. When she said, Davi, man, I came running over. What do you want? What do you want? You know, she was ferocious. And we had a lovely basement apartment, and they stayed in the basement of our house. I love this picture. This is our youngest daughter, Sarika, and this is Paiakan's oldest daughter, Oe, and behind her is Tanya, their middle daughter. And neither of these girls spoke a word of each other's language, but they just got along famously. And we took them up Grouse Mountain. The girls had never seen snow in their lives. They loved going down the sled, up and down, up and down. This is my older daughter, Severin, and Tanya. And Paiakan hated snow. While we were doing this, he was sitting in the car with his back to us, wouldn't look at us, just smoking cigarettes like this. We took them all over British Columbia to meet First Nations people. This is in Alert Bay with the Kwakwaka'wakw people. And it was very moving. Everywhere they were greeted like relatives. And people would get up and give speeches and say, our ancestors went through 150 years ago what your people are going through today, and we support you in your fight. And they were very poor communities, but they gave them thousands of dollars to support their battle. When they had been at our place for 3 weeks, Irakran came up one day and she said, Tara, Davi! So we came running over. And Tara spoke Portuguese and Paiakan spoke Portuguese, so they did all the translating. But basically she said, it's cold in your country. I'm not comfortable here. I miss my mother and father. My children should be studying with the elders. But I came up here because you said you'd buy me an airplane. Now where's my airplane? We're going, what the hell is she talking about? So then we tried to figure out what went on. And when we were discussing the death threats, one of our ideas was, well, maybe we could set up a bank in Haida, the nearest town, and we'll buy Paiakan a radio phone so that when Paiakan can stay in the village of Aokri, so where he's safe, but when he needs to go out for politicking or anything, he can phone up the bank and they'll charter a plane and come and pick him up. Irakran thought, we said, we'll set up a bank account and buy you an airplane. I mean, money, they had no concept of money. So she thought, we're very rich, of course we'd buy him an airplane. Well, the next week I had to go to London to give a speech, and London, England. And as soon as I got to London, I called a friend of mine, a woman named Anita Roddick, who started a very successful company called The Body Shop. And I knew that Anita had met Paiakan, so I called her. I said, Anita, Paiakan needs an airplane. Can you help us out? She wrote me a check for $100,000 US. Meanwhile, Tara was back in Vancouver. She had found there were websites for used airplanes. So she downloaded all of these pictures and specs of used airplanes. And when I got back to Vancouver, I have this surreal memory of sitting on a couch with Irakran on one side, Paiakan on the other, flipping through the pictures, and Irakran's going, oh, that looks like a nice airplane. Oh, I like that one. Anyway, we finally found a plane. This is, for those of you that know anything about planes, this is a Cessna Utility 206, and it was in Galveston, Texas. And Tara found this guy, who is one of my great heroes, Al Johnson, who's a pilot for American Airlines, but he lives in Vancouver. And Tara had found out that Al flew for Greenpeace in his spare time and had flown Bridget Bardot to the ice fields of Newfoundland to object to the sealing going on. So she called Al and told him the situation. Right away he said, hey, that's great, I'll go down to Galveston and check it out for you. So on his own time, on his own money, he flew to Galveston, flew the plane, he called us, he said, it's a great buy, $50,000, buy it. So we sent him the $100,000, he tore the tanks out, the seats out of the back, put in extra fuel tanks, and at the height of hurricane season, flew it across the Caribbean, hip-hopping from island to island to avoid the hurricanes, all the way to Brazil, all the way to Aokri. And he lived in Aokri for 2 months to fly the plane for Paiakan. And nobody in Canada even knows that. To me, he's one of the great heroes. So, and he's single, anyway, by now, the family had been at our house for 6 weeks. Irakran was smiling all the time now she had her airplane. Paiakan said, look, I think it's long enough. I think things will cool down. We're going home. So we took them to the airport, and as they were leaving, they begged us to come and visit them. And we decided right away, let's go. And 4 months later, here we are flying in the plane that we had bought for them, flying into Aokri. If we had taken a canoe from Haida, the nearest town, it would have taken us 14 days to get to this village. I mean, it's way the hell in the Amazon. But now they've got an airplane. They had a strip cut beside their village. 200 people live in these huts. And this hut is where Paiakan lives. And we were put up in this hut here. But we spent most of our time in the river. It was very hot in the daytime. So we swam in the river all the time. The women fished for piranhas there, which we ate. And they gathered their water from a spring in the side of the river. And we spent 2 weeks down there, and it was like being in paradise. Here, Severn, who was 9, and Sarika, who was 6, were reunited with their 2 friends, Oe and Tanya. 4 days after we get there, they had a festa, a celebration. Not for us, it was just a standard celebration. And wow, here are Oe and Tanya. Look at the incredible outfits. And the women had spectacular outfits made of wood with feathers hanging out. Just absolutely sensational. And they had a 3-day celebration, and it was great to experience it. Of course, every day we had to go out and gather food because they had no electricity. And it was wonderful because most of the time we went fishing. And this was a day we went out. And you can see Paiakan's got this fish here. It's about 6 feet long, and that was an electric eel. And his cousin Mokuka is killing another one. So he caught those two for the elders in the village. But we had just a wonderful time. And as we were coming out after 2 weeks, we saw the gold mines and we saw the burning at the edge of the forest. And it resulted in Tara and I deciding we had to really get serious about trying to do something. This is 12 years later. I got a chance. I was filming for the Sacred Balance, and so as soon as I was finished filming in the Amazon, I chartered a plane and flew in again. So here I am, united with my old friend Paiakan, 12 years later, and Irikron right away said, I got to paint you. So I said, don't paint my face, I have to be filmed, but how long will the paint last? She said, 7 or 8 days. Lasted 30 days. So, I got back to Vancouver, I go to the gym, take off my clothes, But here's the family 12 years later. Irikron now, I thought, had aged incredibly. I was quite shocked to see Irikron. This is Mayao, who was the baby when she came to Vancouver. This is Tanya, the middle daughter. And this is Iramon, another child, a son that they had. Paiakan has decided the struggle's got to be carried on by his daughters. He said, I want to send my girls to university so they can fight with white man's tools. Will you help me? So Tara and I set up an account, and we've been supporting his daughters in university. Unfortunately, Ohe went to university, immediately got pregnant by a white guy who abandoned her. He wasn't interested. And so she's now a single mom. And then Tanya went 2 years later, and she got pregnant right away. And so the two of them are single mothers trying to struggle in university. And quite frankly, I don't think they're going to make it. So Paiakan has contacted me, and he said he wants to send Mayao to Vancouver and stay in my house. I guess I'm supposed to stop all the males from inseminating her. And he wants her to go to UBC. And, I'm not that. It's a huge responsibility, but Tara's all keen, so if history is any indication, I guess Mayao is going to be coming and staying at our place and going to university. But as we left the village in 1989, Tara and I decided we had to do more to protect wilderness everywhere. So in 1990, we started the David Suzuki Foundation, and Tara immediately quit her job at Harvard to become the full-time, non-paid president of the foundation, and she's a wonderful representative or spokesperson for the foundation. It's a science-based organization that looks for the underlying root causes of our destructiveness so that we can now find alternatives or solutions which we then try to communicate. When we were coming out, our daughter Severn, who was 9, got very worried about the burning that she saw, so she got back to Vancouver and started a club called ECHO, the Environmental Children's Organization, and began to go and give talks at schools about why the forests are important and so on. In 1991, when she was 11, she came to me, she said, Dad, I hear there's going to be a big meeting in Rio next year. Are you going? No. Well, I'm going to take ECHO. Why? All those grown-ups are going to be making big decisions, and they're not even going to be thinking about kids. I think ECHO should go to be the conscience of the grown-ups. I said, well, it's going to cost a lot of money, and it's going to be hot, and, I don't know. And she said, well, I'm going to try to raise money and take my club. 2 months later, she comes in, hey, Dad, what do you think? It was a check for $1,000. A guy named Doug Tompkins, Doug and Susie started a clothing company called Esprit. And when Doug and Susie split up, Susie bought Doug out and paid him a huge chunk of money. And Doug flies all over the world buying wilderness and supporting environmental groups. And he came up to see Tara and me because he heard we'd started the David Suzuki Foundation. And while he was staying with us, Severn came bouncing in and started talking and told him her idea. And he said, that's a good idea, write to me. She did, and he sent her $1,000. Didn't give us anything. Anyway, so I said, okay, so maybe it's a good idea. I said, good for you. You've raised $1,000. Mommy and I will match every dollar you raise. Here's $1,000, and let's go see how much you can raise. Bad idea. She went out and raised $14,000. So in 1992, when she was 12, she went off then to the Earth Summit. And so here we are in Rio. Of course, Tara's there, and here are the girls that came up to the Earth Summit. And this man is a singer. A lot of Americans know him, Raffi. Raffi is a children's singer. He, when he heard about it, gave Severn $4,000 and said, I'm going to come down with you and sing for you. And he did. The girls rented a booth at the Global Forum, and they had 3 newspapers they had printed in Vancouver. They brought down. The girls spoke Spanish, French, and English. And pretty soon a Japanese television crew came and did a story about them, a Canadian crew, an English crew, and Severn was invited to address the Earth Summit itself.
Hello, I'm Severn Suzuki, speaking for ECHO, the Environmental Children's Organization. We're a group of 12 and 13-year-olds trying to make a difference. Vanessa Setty, Morgan Geisler, Michelle Quigg, and me. We've raised all the money to come here ourselves, to come 5,000 miles to tell you adults you must change your ways. Coming up here today, I have no hidden agenda. I am fighting for my future. Losing my future is not like losing an election or a few points on the stock market. I am here to speak for all generations to come. I am here to speak on behalf of the starving children around the world whose cries go unheard. I am here to speak for the countless animals dying across this planet because they have nowhere left to go. I am afraid to go out in the sun now because of the holes in our ozone. I am afraid to breathe the air because I don't know what chemicals are in it. I used to go fishing in Vancouver, my home, with my dad, until just a few years ago we found the fish full of cancers. And now we hear of animals and plants going extinct, every day vanishing forever. In my life, I have dreamt of seeing the great herds of wild animals, jungles and rainforests full of birds and butterflies. But now I wonder if they will even exist for my children to see. Did you have to worry of these things when you were my age? All this is happening before our eyes, and yet we act as if we have all the time we want and all the solutions. I'm only a child, and I don't have all the solutions. But I want you to realize, neither do you. You don't know how to fix the holes in our ozone layer. You don't know how to bring the salmon back up a dead stream. You don't know how to bring back an animal now extinct. And you can't bring back the forest that once grew where there is now a desert. If you don't know how to fix it, please stop breaking it. Here, you may be delegates of your government, business people, organizers, reporters, or politicians, but really, your mothers and fathers, sisters and brothers, aunts and uncles, and all of you are someone's child. I'm only a child, yet I know we are all part of a family, 5 billion strong. In fact, 30 million species strong. And borders and governments will never change that. I'm only a child, yet I know we are all in this together and should act as one single world towards one single goal. In my anger, I am not blind, and in my fear, I am not afraid of telling the world how I feel. In my country, we make so much waste. We buy and throw away, buy and throw away, buy and throw away, and yet northern countries will not share with the needy. Even when we have more than enough, we are afraid to share. We are afraid to let go of some of our wealth. In Canada, we live the privileged life, with plenty of food, water, and shelter. We have watches, bicycles, computers, and television sets. The list could go on for 2 days. 2 days ago, here in Brazil, we were shocked when we spent time with some children living on the streets. This is what one child told us. I wish I was rich. And if I were, I would give all the street children food, clothes, medicines, shelter, and love and affection If a child on the streets who has nothing is willing to share, why are we who have everything still so greedy? I can't stop thinking that these are children my own age, that it makes a tremendous difference where you are born. That I could be one of those children living in the favelas of Rio. I could be a child starving in Somalia, or a victim of war in the Middle East, or a beggar in India. I am only a child, yet I know if all the money spent on war was spent on finding environmental answers, ending poverty, and finding treaties, what a wonderful place this earth would be. At school, even in kindergarten, you teach us how to behave in the world. You teach us not to fight with others, to work things out, to respect others, to clean up our mess, not to hurt other creatures, to share, not be greedy. Then why do you go out and do the things you tell us not to do? Do not forget why you are attending these conferences, who you're doing this for. We are your own children. You are deciding what kind of a world we are growing up in. Parents should be able to comfort their children by saying, everything's going to be all right. It's not the end of the world, and we're doing the best we can. But I don't think you can say that to us anymore. Are we even on your list of priorities? My dad always says, you are what you do, not what you say. Well, what you do makes me cry at night. You grown-ups say you love us, but I challenge you, please, make your actions reflect your words. Thank you.
Finished her speech, she came back to sit with us, and this man jumped up and rushed over and shook her hand and said, that's the best speech anyone gave at Rio. And it was Al Gore. So last fall, I was asked to go to a dinner honoring Al and to give a toast to Al. And when I came into the room, he jumped up and hugged me like a long-lost friend, and I'm sure it was because I was Severin's dad. Anyway, so a few vignettes. I'm sorry I've gone on far too long, but thank you for coming and sharing just a few experiences.